They called her many names: Isis, Sophia, Shakti, Shekinah. But over centuries, the divine feminine, once revered as the heartbeat of creation, was buried beneath dogma, conquest, and silence. Yet she was never gone, just hidden. Today, you feel her whisper in the quiet of the forest, in the gaze of the moon, in the moments your intuition speaks louder than logic. But what if I told you this ancient force is not just symbolic? What if it's a living energy woven into the very fabric of your being, waiting to be remembered? This is not about gender. It's not about goddess worship or New Age labels. This is about a principle that predates religion, older than any empire, a primordial intelligence that balances the universe itself. The divine feminine is not soft. She is wild. She is chaos. She is order. She is the blueprint of creation and the force behind transformation. And yet, most of us have forgotten her. In this video, we're going to journey beyond the myths. We'll explore why ancient mystery schools guarded her knowledge, why patriarchal systems suppressed her, and most importantly, how reclaiming the divine feminine in our lives can awaken something you didn't even know was sleeping. You'll learn the hidden meanings encoded in symbols, ancient texts, and archetypes. You'll understand how this energy moves through your intuition, your dreams, your creativity, and you'll discover real, powerful ways to embody it starting today. Because the world is not dying from a lack of progress. It's starving for balance. And the return of the divine feminine is not just a spiritual idea. It may be the key to humanity's next evolution. So take a deep breath. Open your heart. And listen, not just with your mind, but with your soul. The ancient ones are speaking. And they are calling her name again. Long before monotheism, before scriptures were inked and creeds were carved into stone, the cosmos was perceived not through dominion but through rhythm, relationship, and reverence. The earliest civilizations did not worship a god, they revered the goddess. From the Paleolithic Venus figurines to the temples of Inanna in ancient Sumer, from the priestesses of Isis in Egypt to the Shakti temples in India, the divine feminine was not an abstract idea. She was the ground of being, the mother of stars, the embodiment of sacred intelligence. The ancients saw the universe as a great womb, dark, mysterious, and endlessly creative. They didn't separate spirit and matter, logic and emotion, masculine and feminine. They saw complementarity, a dance. In Taoism, this was yin and yang. In Kabbalah, chokmah and bina. In alchemy, sulfur and mercury. But what happened? As societies shifted from cooperative tribes to hierarchical kingdoms, as conquest replaced communion, the sacred feminine, too fluid, too unpredictable, too untamable, was deemed dangerous. And so, she was systematically removed. Mystery schools went underground. Oracles were silenced. Goddesses became saints, or demons, or myths. And the divine feminine was reframed, not as a force but as a temptation, a warning. Yet her presence never truly vanished. Hidden in esoteric texts, encoded in tarot, etched in architecture, and whispered in folklore, she waited. The Gnostics called her Sophia, divine wisdom exiled from the heavens. In Hermetic teachings, she was nature, the magnetic force that draws spirit into form. In Tantra, she is Shakti, pure creative power. Philosophers like Plotinus, mystics like Hildegard of Bingen, and poets like Rumi all spoke of a hidden principle, an animating soul that flows beneath the surface of appearances. And what's more fascinating, every spiritual tradition, at its mystical core, points to a reunion of masculine and feminine, of heaven and earth, of light and shadow. This is not about exalting one over the other. It's about remembering that wholeness was the original truth. The suppression of the divine feminine has not only harmed women, it has wounded humanity's psyche, cutting us off from intuition, empathy, cycles, and the ability to receive rather than only do. But now, the cycle turns again. In an age of hypermasculinized progress, something ancient stirs. The rise in spiritual seeking, the collective fatigue with force-based systems, the yearning for connection, softness, embodiment, it all signals her return. The divine feminine is not coming back to rule. She's returning to restore. Not as a deity to be worshipped, but as a force to be embodied. Because when she awakens within us, we don't just gain balance. we remember the sacred blueprint of life itself. To understand the divine feminine, we must stop thinking of her as a person and begin recognizing her as a principle. She is not a mythological goddess on a throne of stars, she is the intelligence that births the stars. She is not just in you, she moves through you. So what is the divine feminine? She is creation without control, intuition without needing proof, power that flows rather than forces. Imagine the ocean. Vast, mysterious, and constantly in motion. You cannot command the tides, but when you surrender to their rhythm, you are carried. That is her essence. In ancient teachings, the divine feminine was represented through symbols, not doctrines. The moon, for example, ever-changing, cyclical, glowing in darkness. Unlike the sun's linear, direct light, the moon reflects, she reveals truths that only arise in stillness. The womb, too, is not just biological, it is a sacred metaphor. The void where life gestates, the space where transformation brews in silence, unseen. In esotericism, this is known as the generative darkness, the fertile emptiness from which all things arise. The chalice, the spiral, the rose, the cupole, these ancient icons encode the same message. The divine feminine is the energy that receives, transforms, and births. But over time, society came to value what is visible, measurable, productive. We were taught that linear progress, rationality, and control are superior to feeling, surrender, and fluidity. And so, the qualities of the feminine were exiled into the shadows. Intuition became irrational. Emotion became weak. Rest became lazy. Softness became submissive. But here's the truth. You cannot create from force alone. You cannot evolve through logic alone. You cannot love without feeling, connect without vulnerability, or grow without surrender. The divine feminine is the soil in which spirit takes root. And she shows up in our lives more often than we realize. When you listen to your gut without needing to justify it. When you sit in silence and feel your truth rise from the depths. When you hold space for someone not to fix them, but to witness them. That is her. She is in the artist who paints from a place they can't name. In the mother who cradles without speaking. In the healer who touches not just the body, but the soul. She doesn't shout, she doesn't demand. She calls softly, deeply, within. And that is why many miss her. We are conditioned to respond to noise, speed, certainty. But the divine feminine dwells in stillness, in ambiguity, in the in-between. And perhaps, that's the point. Because to connect with her, you must turn inward. You must descend, not climb. You must feel, not just think. The ancient mystics understood this descent as sacred. Inanna, the Sumerian goddess, descended into the underworld not to conquer, but to be stripped bare. Each layer she removed was a symbol of ego, identity, control. Until all that remained was truth. This is the path of the divine feminine. It is not always beautiful. It is raw, shadowy, uncomfortable. But it is real. And it leads to rebirth not by force, but by surrender. The deeper you walk into the mystery of the divine feminine, the more you realize as she defies definition. She is a paradox. She is both the healer and the destroyer. Both gentle flow and raging storm. Both void and womb. This is where many spiritual seekers get lost. They look for her only in light, in love, in soft whispers. But the divine feminine is not just nurturing. She is also the energy that undoes you so you can become real. In Hindu mythology, this duality is embodied in Parvati and Kali. Parvati, the loving mother, and Kali, the fierce awakener, are not separate goddesses. They are different faces of the same force. When we speak of divine feminine energy, we're speaking of life's ability to birth, transform, and reclaim. This is why, in the ancient world, her temples were often at the center of mystery schools. To study her was to confront truth not abstractly, but experientially. And perhaps this is why patriarchal systems feared her, not because she was weak, but because she was limitless. The divine feminine represents the irrational, the uncontrollable, the unpredictable. She cannot be contained in doctrine, hierarchy, or linear thought. Even in Christian mysticism, Mary Magdalene, often labeled a sinner, was in truth a high initiate of the sacred feminine. The Gospel of Mary, buried for centuries, presents her not as a passive follower, but as one who understood what the male disciples could not, that the path to the divine lies not in blind obedience but in inner gnosis. But modern society still struggles with this truth. We have inherited generations of programming that celebrates the mind, dismisses the body, and distrusts the unseen. And yet, the world today is starved of what the divine feminine offers: presence, wholeness, being, not just becoming. Let's go deeper. At the heart of the divine feminine lies emptiness, but not in the sense of lack. Rather, it is the sacred void, the silence before the song, the darkness before the dawn. In Taoism, this is the wu-wei art of non-doing, where things arise effortlessly from alignment, not force. It is also the womb space within each of us, regardless of gender, where ideas gestate, emotions are held, and transformation brews. And this is perhaps her most misunderstood gift. She doesn't just teach us how to act. She teaches us how to receive, to surrender, to trust, to sit in discomfort without rushing to fix it, to allow mystery to unfold in its own time. But here's the tension. To embrace the divine feminine, we must become comfortable with not knowing. We must allow space for silence. We must release the addiction to certainty. This is not easy, especially in a culture built on productivity, answers, and control. But it is essential, because without her, we live lopsided. We may succeed, but never feel whole. We may know everything, but never feel wise. We may speak constantly, but never truly listen. The divine feminine doesn't offer quick fixes or spiritual shortcuts. She offers initiation, a return to the depths, a reweaving of the broken threads inside us. And in that descent into body, into feeling, into shadow, we remember what we forgot. That the divine doesn't only live in the heavens. It lives within. It moves through our breath, our dreams, our stillness. And it has always, quietly, waited. So, how do we bring the divine feminine from the realm of myth and mysticism into the rhythm of our everyday lives? The answer is not in doing more. It's in doing differently. You don't summon the divine feminine like a spell. You create space for her. And that begins with slowing down. Start simple. Create sacred pauses throughout your day. Moments where you breathe not just for oxygen, but for presence. The divine feminine lives in the now. She doesn't rush. She invites. Next, reconnect with your body. Not as an object to be sculpted or judged, but as a sacred instrument of wisdom. Try this. Each morning, place your hand over your womb or your lower belly, regardless of gender. Breathe deeply. Ask your body, what do you need today? Then listen. Not with the mind, but with the senses. This practice alone can open a gateway to intuition, because the divine feminine speaks through feeling, through sensation, through gut knowing, not just thoughts. Another key practice, rest. Not as laziness, but as devotion. We've been conditioned to see rest as the absence of value. But rest is where the deepest transformations occur. Just like the moon disappears before becoming full again. You, too, need stillness to become whole. Then there's creative flow. Write, dance, sing. Not to impress, not for outcome, but to express. The divine feminine is the source of raw, unfiltered creation. When you create from your essence and out your ego, you open the channel for her to move through you. Journaling is another sacred tool. Ask yourself questions like, where am I resisting softness? What parts of me feel unloved or unseen? What wisdom is hidden in my emotions? Let your answers arise not to be solved, but to be held. You can also reconnect through ritual. Light a candle. Anoint your skin with oil. Take a moonlit walk in silence. Create a space where the sacred feels welcome. And if you want something deeper, practice what ancient priestesses called womb listening. Lie down, place both hands over your womb or heart. Visualize a golden spiral of light turning inward. Ask, what wants to be born through me? What wants to be released? You may not hear words. You may feel tears. Let them come. The divine feminine doesn't demand articulation. She honors feeling. She thrives in trust. And finally, honor cycles. The moon waxes and wanes. Tides rise and fall. Your energy is not meant to be constant. Give yourself permission to flow. Track your emotional and energetic rhythms. Notice when you feel creative and when you crave stillness. This is not inconsistency. It's wisdom. The more you attune to these rhythms, the more you'll see that the divine feminine isn't some distant deity. She's in the breath between your thoughts, the softness in your hands, the silence that speaks louder than words. And as you begin to embody her not perfectly, but honestly, you'll find something astonishing. Your life begins to feel sacred, even in its mess, even in its quiet. Because the divine feminine doesn't come to fix you. She comes to remind you, you were never broken. The divine feminine is not a destination. She is a remembrance, a returning to something ancient and achingly familiar. Not outside of you, but within you. She is the part of you that knows how to trust before proof, feel before words, and receive without fear. For too long, we've walked a world shaped by imbalance, a world obsessed with action, domination, and certainty. But beneath the noise, beneath the structure, something quieter, wiser, and older has been stirring. The divine feminine is not rising in opposition. She's rising in harmony, not to replace the masculine, but to balance it. And in doing so, she invites us into a new way of being. Not softer but truer, not slower but wiser, not passive but powerfully receptive. Because when you embody her, you don't lose strength. You gain wholeness. You become the storm and the stillness, the question and the answer, the breath and the silence between. So now, I'll leave you with this. What part of you have you silenced because it didn't fit the world's rhythm? What part of you longs to feel, to soften, to listen to? Remember, that whisper, that ache, that pull? It's her, the divine feminine, calling you home. If this spoke to something deep within you, let it echo. Share this video. Tell me in the comments, what does the divine feminine mean to you? And subscribe for more journeys into hidden wisdom and spiritual truth. The sacred is not lost. It's simply waiting for someone like you to remember.